should work now. Let's see. Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Joe, good to see you as well. Evening, how you doing? How you been? JP, good to see you as well. Evening, how you doing? How you been? How's the voice, everyone? Is the voice good? Is the voice issue and the glitch issue fixed? Thumbs up if it's fixed. Can everybody hear me clearly now? Because the past lives, we've had issues with Restream, the platform that I'm using essentially to stream to YouTube and X. But how about now? Because I had a conversation with Restream regarding the glitches of the live. Yesterday, after the live, I had a live chat with the team, and they said it should be fixed. So is the voice good? Is the volume good? Everyone's good? No more glitches? Yes, we're good. Voice is good. Perfect. We are back. Let's go. Evening, Miles of CMF. Tor, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles of CMF. Artistic, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? It's perfect. Let's go, Joe. Sounds good. Let's go, Comatose. How's Mr. Miles tonight? John, I'm doing great. How you doing, John? Perfect. Very voice good. Yes. Let's go, Kerry. Okay. It's so great to, have this whole voice and the glitch thing completely fixed. Now, a lot of things have been happening, which we're going to go through on tonight's live. But also, right before I went live, I saw a news article that came out of nowhere, and it said Canada has accepted to become the 51st state of the United States. Not sure how true that is in any sort of a way, or if it was just some sort of gag reel, news article. But just saw that straight away on X as I was about to go on live. So that should be an interesting one regarding Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. I mean, it works out on their benefit, to be fairly honest. But let's see by tomorrow if that's true news. Now, welcome everyone to essentially to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles, and this is episode 316 of the CMF Live. And in this live, Monday to Friday, you can tune in where I talk about the most recent news happening around the world in terms of cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI and politics and regulations, pretty much everything you need to know about the world going fully digital. Now, the disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So, if you're watching the first time ever, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're a regular, let's go CMF. By the way, we also do live Q&As on this live as well. So if you do have any questions or statements to make, put them down inside the comment section. More than happy to answer any questions you may have. Also, thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has liked this live. Especially if you're watching this right now on X CMF members, thank you so much to everybody who's liked the live, retweeted the live, and put a comment outside the live. And thanks so much to everyone on YouTube who's watching right now who's also liked the live as well. If you haven't done that, CMF members, take 5 seconds or even 3 seconds to like and retweet the live. If you watch this on X, if you watch on YouTube, just like the live. Now, tonight, we're going to be discussing a few topics that's circulating around. So we're going to talk about essentially Circle on tonight's live. We know for a fact that there's a, Circle might be brought out by Ripple, might be brought out by Coinbase, and also they're going public at the same time. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because Circle apparently has just signed up a new partnership, quite a massive partnership, to be fairly honest. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin loans on tonight's live as well. We're also going to be talking about Tether on tonight's live regarding their $5 billion investment inside the United States. We're also going to go through news regarding US stocks essentially rallying because of Trump saying that he wants to delay the EU essentially tariff situation. We're also going to go through news regarding the US Senator Luminous, who is now prioritizing Bitcoin reserves for legislation to be happening inside the United States. We're also going to be talking about Circle's acquisition of hash notes on tonight's live as well. We're going to go through news BitGet on tonight's live as well. BitGet has introduced a new feature. We're going to go through news also regarding Prometheum. Essentially is the first, you could say, crypto exchange that was fully approved by the SEC. That's only because it has actual SEC members inside of it. We're also going to go through news regarding Thailand on tonight's live. Yesterday, we talked about the ASEAN countries, the 10 Southeast Asian countries that have decided to come together to go fully digital in terms of trade and cross-border payments and so on. We're going to go through news also regarding China on tonight's live, due to China being rejected on investing essentially inside the United States by Donald Trump. China has decided to put their money somewhere else. We're also going to go through news regarding on tonight's live the Binance founder CZ. CZ has come out with a very interesting tweet, which was, we get to that news, I'll reveal what it is. And we're also going to go through news, BlackRock news tonight on tonight's live as well. We're going to talk about a Binance integration into a Latin American payment system. And we're going to be talking about Ohio's candidate, Vivek Ramsey, which we haven't talked about for a while. And we're also going to go through news regarding XRP, Ripple, tokenization, which we talked about yesterday's live as well, when we revealed that Dubai essentially is investing into, Dubai is into the XRP ledger. It's the first one they're using for tokenization of real estate, which I revealed yesterday's live. But we have some more information on tonight's live as well to go through. And we're going to go through how XRP, gold, and essentially the S&P 500 are pretty much par on par. Now, those are the news topics we're going to go through on tonight's live. And the first one essentially being regarding WorldPay, which is now a partner of Circle, USDC. They're enabling essentially USDC payments, which is a brilliant move, to be fairly honest. Another way of essentially connecting the traditional financial system to the digital world. Now, before we go through this news, let's go inside the comment section first, and then we go straight into this news. I hope the first, JP says essentially that was to do with Trump's tweet. Yep. Commenter says, I hope 51st state is true. Same, I'll be honest. Good day, Miles and CMF. Mike, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, brother Miles and CMF family. Funky brother, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, brother. Come on, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles and CMF. Stormy, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Any news on the Ripple case? No updates so far, but we'll probably get updates within a few weeks, essentially, or even less, regarding the Ripple case. Good evening, Miles. How are you doing? I'm doing great. How you doing? How you been? Good, Manny, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Kerry, when are we going to talk about ZBEC network? Yeah, we talked about ZBEC network actually. So on yesterday's live and on some phone calls. So I've had, I normally receive phone calls from CMF members. Obviously, I never reveal what we talk about because, it's private information that people want to discuss. But I've had discussions regarding ZBEC to people. I've also talked about ZBEC on yesterday's live, where I said, quoted, quote by quote, I said pretty much that I said projects like ZBEC come and go. I said once there's a project inside a crypto space that everybody's talking about that comes out of nowhere. Now, ZBEC is an old crypto project, but I said whenever there's a crypto project that comes out of nowhere and everybody's talking about it, it suddenly also disappears at the same time as well. And I said that ZBEC, word for word, it's not going to hold value. And interesting enough, today, people are tweeting out on X that they don't trust ZBEC. They think ZBEC is a scam, and they think it's going to fail 100% due to its founders. Interesting enough, I said this essentially yesterday. And I also said on a phone call to a member of the CMF that I wouldn't touch ZBEC with a 10-foot pole. That's exactly what I said, word for word, on a phone call to a CMF member. And yesterday's live, I also revealed that I would not touch ZBEC in any sort of a way. I said projects that suddenly come out of nowhere inside the crypto space, everybody's talking about it, also disappear suddenly as well. And yeah, today everyone's saying ZBEC is a scam. Saw that coming a mile away. Good evening, Miles. Let's see where we were at. We were at GameStop stock. Entertainment, you don't need to type it in twice. I read everybody's comments one by one, just a heads up. If they want to be a part of the Golden Dome security, they can have it for free if they become one of the 51st states. Low. That's why. Can Ripple get approved for spot ETF while still in the case pending? Can Ripple essentially get approved for a spot ETF while it's still... It can. The SEC can approve essentially if they wanted to an XRP ETF, but they won't because it will create maybe more confusion. So the case needs to go away on paper, and then that straight after they should approve XRP ETFs. The reason why the SEC takes a lot of time to approve any sort of ETFs is because they need time to look into the chain, to look at what it's going to do. Is it a security? Is it non-security? Is it a derivative? Whatever it may be, essentially. But when it comes to the XRP ledger, I mean, the SEC's had the longest look into the XRP ledger than any other, essentially, crypto project out there. They've had the longest look into Ripple, longest look into XRP ledger, longest look into XRP. So there shouldn't be any sort of reasons, essentially, that they would reject it, essentially, in any sort of a way for an XRP ETF after the case is fully done on paper. Now, the first news on tonight's live is regarding WorldPay. WorldPay has enabled, essentially, USDC payments in US and Europe. I just want to also say, just CMF members, just right now inside the chat, everybody put a fire emoji or a rocket emoji, so that is in the first comment everybody gets to see. Regarding the moron that tweeted that essentially said inside the comment section, I blocked him anyways. But everybody inside the comment section, put fire emojis, rocket emojis. Whenever somebody says moronic comments inside the comment section, everybody just go crazy inside the chat with emojis. So that isn't essentially the first thing people get to see, because there's morons always about. Thank you for that, CMF members. Good evening, Miles. I hope you had a great bank holiday weekend, mate. Let's go. Adi, how you doing? Miles, I've just blocked this moron. Thank you so much, Funky Brother, for that. Now, WorldPay. WorldPay has enabled USDC payments in US and Europe, a brilliant way, another way of seeing essentially traditional financial spaces connected to the digital space. The payment processor WorldPay will now enable its US and European customers to use the stablecoin USDC for business transactions, a significant shift essentially in digital financial services. WorldPay's move essentially to integrate USDC payment reflects growing stablecoin adoption, affecting essentially digital finance industries and dynamics and market operations. WorldPay, a leading payment solutions essentially provider, is expanding its services by allowing US and European customers to make essentially payments using USDC stablecoins. This step aligns with its strategy to streamline financial transactions through advanced digital solutions. The collaboration includes key industry players such as WorldPay's executive John and Ahmad, enhancing essentially their platform's functionalities by adopting essentially stablecoin payments. WorldPay demonstrates its commitment to modernizing its payment infrastructure worldwide. The integration of USDC could create immediate effects on transaction speed and efficiency for merchants, signaling a critical essentially shift in payment processing. As stablecoins reach new market highs, businesses may increasingly essentially increase their rely on them for cross-border transactions because it is a lot more cheaper, faster, and transparent. By incorporating USDC, WorldPay aligns this essentially blockchain innovation, likely affecting broader market dynamics and increasing competition among payment platforms. The company's existing essential infrastructure might further enable seamless transactions to digital assets. And in terms of potential outcomes, the use of stablecoins to major processors like WorldPay could foster increased crypto adoption and regulatory essential considerations, especially when stablecoins essentially market value expect to grow significantly. Such trends will demand close monitoring by financial stakeholders moving forward. And John, the SVP head of payouts at WorldPay, said, "With a history of delivering innovative payment solutions, we are excited to meet the rising interest from clients seeking faster, more efficient global payment methods." I mean, this is brilliant, especially when Ripple is going to be buying out Circle. Circle being essentially partnered with WorldPay. They're going to be integrating USDC into their payment systems. WorldPay is pretty much used by every merchant around the world, you could pretty much say. It's brilliant news for stablecoins, brilliant news for the crypto sector. Another way of showing, the traditional financial sector connecting essentially to the crypto space. And when Ripple buys Circle out, that's even better. Now, what we're going to be talking about next, moving on essentially from WorldPay and USDC integrations to Bitcoin loans. Now, Bitcoin loans often happen quite a lot inside of Wall Street. In fact, there's a Wall Street essentially firm that lets ETF holders, Bitcoin ETF holders from BlackRock, from essentially 21 Shares, Grayscale, and so on, to invest their assets of essentially skipping on tax by borrowing against their Bitcoin ETFs. Now, Cantor Fitzgerald is now launching a $2 billion Bitcoin loan program. Cantor Fitzgerald has launched a Bitcoin-backed program today, partnering with Falcon X and Maple Finance, marking a significant essentially move for Wall Street's involvement in cryptocurrencies. Cantor Fitzgerald's Bitcoin financing business aims to enhance digital asset markets, led by Chairman Brandon Lochting, who emphasized the blend of expertise and essentially entrepreneurship in creating a Wall Street advantage. Collaborations with Falcon X and Maple Finance highlight this pioneering essentially move. Earlier on, Cantor essentially recognized the transformative impact of digital asset financial services would have essentially on the global economy. This achievement highlights how the combination of Cantor essentially deep expertise and entrepreneurial spirit creates a essentially distinct advantage on Wall Street and further solidifies our position as a leading investment bank for crypto and digital assets and their clients, said essentially Brandon, the chairman of Cantor Fitzgerald. Now, the key participants, including Falcon X, led by Josh, and Maple Finance, co-founded essentially by Sidney Powell. Digital asset credit infrastructure sees substantial enhancements as demand is rising right now for the crypto sector. By supporting institutional needs, Cantor essentially strengthens its position in the crypto market space in the loan department. Immediate market impacts include improved liquidity and access to capital for institutional clients. This development essentially aids the evolving relationship between traditional and digital finance coming together once again. Participants also highlight the transformative potential of regulated channels for institutional essentially engagements, and potential financial outcomes involve increased capital efficient trading opportunities and better liquidity strategies for institutions. Experts also suggest that this initiative might lead to a wider adoption of essentially of Bitcoin and for cryptocurrencies in the institutional grade lending, and aligned with essentially historical trends, indicating a growing crypto integration on Wall Street. Borrowing against your assets is pretty much the best thing you could do to skip on tax. It's not financial advice in any sort of way, just want to point that out. But logically, borrowing against your crypto assets, you don't get taxed on debt. Depends on your own jurisdictions, but in most jurisdictions, you don't really get taxed on debt. So if you have crypto assets and if you sell them, then you're liable for tax. However, if you take your crypto assets and put them essentially in firms like Cantor Fitzgerald or put them in firms like Nexo and so on, who are licensed, make sure they're licensed in your own jurisdictions. If you put your assets with them, borrow against your assets, you don't get taxed whatsoever. This is why Wall Street loves the idea of borrowing against your crypto assets. Obviously, again, this is not financial advice in any sort of way, because if you don't pay back the money you borrowed against your assets, then obviously your assets are gone. Now, what we're going to be talking about next is Tether. Now, before we talk about Tether, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or comments to make, put them down inside the comment section. Now, let's go inside the comment section first. Free and Forever says, good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you. How you doing, Free and Forever? How you been? Funky Brother says, Miles, Circle are going for an IPO, and they have achieved almost $700 million, £700 million so far. So would they still sell to Ripple? Yes, they can still sell to Ripple if they wanted to. So, the news that's going around regarding Circle, they're still going for an IPO. You know, their Circle is not going to be skipping on that IPO by the looks of it. They're still going to go for it. The news regarding Ripple essentially buying out Circle was, it's not confirmed by Ripple or by Circle. However, it's a great opportunity for Ripple to expand. It's a great opportunity for Ripple to expand because of the monopoly that's going on one side when it comes to Coinbase and essentially Circle and BlackRock and so on. Now, if essentially Circle goes for a full IPO, would Ripple, still buy them out? Would Circle even sell to Ripple if they're going for a full IPO? Yes. If the number is right, they will sell in a blink of a second. It's just all about if the figure is right. If the numbers are right, then they will sell. However, Coinbase has a loud voice in the footsteps that Circle takes. So Coinbase could reject Ripple's offers. And it could just be that Coinbase is rejecting Ripple's offers back to back. Maybe it's not Circle that's rejecting it. Maybe it's just Coinbase is not approving the idea of Ripple buying out Circle, because Coinbase essentially takes 50% in terms of revenues when it comes to USDC. They created it together, Circle, essentially Coinbase. So it could be that way around as well. But would, Circle sell? Yes, they could still sell even if they go full IPO. In fact, Circle could use the full IPO as leverage to get more money out of Ripple as well. Now, the same way they essentially brought Circle to the table to get more money out of Ripple as well. Hi, Miles and family. Golden Dragon, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Now, Tether. Tether is investing $5 billion in US firms, and it highlights its treasury holdings aimed at regulatory scrutiny. Now, we know for a fact that Tether has, in the past, rejected the idea of showing their reserves, especially when it came to the MiCA regulations inside of Europe, where Europe essentially rejected USDT because they wouldn't hold a certain amount of assets in European banks for just in case a depegging situation happens or anything else. On the other hand, USDC had no issues whatsoever, being fully transparent with the EU, hence why USDC operates in the EU and USDT doesn't. Those are just facts. Now, on those bases, Tether is, and we're getting very close to, the Genius Act that's coming out of the United States, which is for stablecoin regulations. And there are certain things that's been discussed regarding the Genius Act. And one of them essentially is that if there's a certain, crypto project, essentially a stablecoin that gets rejected by the United States, it might not be able to operate outside the United States either, where the US might even try to sanction some stablecoins, you could say, in a way, where they said if it's a USD stablecoin, if it's a Euro stablecoin, Japanese stable, a Yen stablecoin, or a Pound stablecoin, they don't care. But if it's a US dollar stablecoin and it gets rejected by the US, then it will get rejected outside the US also, by the looks of it. So Tether decided to show some, prompts of what they're doing and then investments they've done inside the United States to show that they stand with the US. So interesting timing on that. Tether has invested approximately $5 billion in US-based businesses over the past 2 years, Tether's CEO has revealed. According to Tether CEO, the disclosures made essentially on the platform X underscores Tether's efforts to position itself as a contributor to the US economy, aimed the ongoing regulatory debates over stablecoins. Tether just wants to show, we're investing in the US, we want to be, a part of the US, the Stablecoin Act is coming. Please approve us, pretty much. Tether's investments include $775 million in Rumble, a video sharing platform, securing over 103 million shares of Class A common stocks. In 2024, Tether's venture essentially arm, Tether Evo, allocated $200 million to BlackRock's Neurotech company, a brain-computer interference startup, becoming its essential majority owner. The firm also expanded its stake in Bitcoin mining company, essentially BitDeer, to 21%, challenging the mining power to ocean pools. Tether also holds $120 billion in US Treasury bills, making it the 19th largest global holder of US debt, surpassing essentially Germany's $111.4 billion and the United Arab Emirates' $104.4 billion. These also include, which back most by USDT reserves, link Tether's stability directly to the US physical essentially policies. The CEO of Tether emphasized this connection, stating that USDT bolsters the US essentially dollar's global reach, particularly in developing economies where access to traditional banking is limited. Tether's CEO is trying to let the US know that they are going for stablecoin regulation. And Tether's CEO just wants to let the US know that they've been backing the US for the longest time. They're expanding the reach of the US dollars and so on. The issue with all of that is Tether's not an American company, and that's where the issue lies. But the Tether essentially founder comments come as the US lawmakers draft stablecoins and regulations that could affect foreign issuers like Tether. The company, now headquartered in El Salvador, faces scrutiny over transparency and alleged use of USDT in illicit activities. Critics argue that Tether's reserve lack of independent verification through the firm claims it collaborates with law enforcement to freeze suspicious transactions. And in May, Tether's CEO accused unnamed competitors of lobbying to restrict Tether's growth, urging regulators essentially to focus on products over quality. And Lawfare essentially treated that Tether's alignment with US interests, citing his treasury investments and the role essentially in dollars homology. The crypto entrepreneur, Anthony, the essentially Tether founder, has said one of the most important pro-American companies, highlighting its 400 million users and profitability. However, skepticism persists. Analysts note that Tether's acute essentially audit history and resilience on offshore entities, complicating its regulatory standing. For now, Tether's strategy is clear: anchor Tether's narrative and economic essentially patriotism when it comes to the US, leveraging essentially its treasury ties and tech bets to counter regulatory headwinds. Whether its approach secures essentially lasting trust or deepens skepticism, it depends on tangible transparency and adherence to emerging rules. So, is Tether going to essentially open their books and show it to the US when it comes to the stablecoin regulations? Probably not. Instead, Tether wants to do a different approach, where they want to show the US they've been doing investments in the US, and that's the reason why they should be accepted as a stable coin inside the US. I don't think the US cares that much of how much money Tether is invested. I think the US cares more about where Tether is getting its money from. I think that's where they draw the line. It's the same line that the EU drew as well, where the EU was more concerned about where is Tether getting its money from. And if they do have the reserves, they say, why aren't they putting it in EU banks to show that they have some sort of reserves? Hence why they were rejected. So, Tether is doing an interesting approach. They don't want to open up their books in any sort of a way to the US, but they are trying to show the US they've been doing investments in the US. The issue is still there. Where is their money coming from? Now, US stocks is what we're going to talk about next, and Trump. US stocks rally as Trump's delays EU tariffs boost trade optimism. US stocks soared essentially today after President Donald Trump agreed to delay a proposed 50% tariff on European Union imports. This helped the stock market rise slightly, also helped the crypto space rise slightly or be stable. This pause eased essentially investor concerns over an escalated trade war that's been happening around the world and paved the way for essentially accelerated negotiations to be happening while the trade deal is paused. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose nearly by 740 points, while the S&P 500 climbed 2.05%, and the tech-heavy, essentially Nasdaq Composite jumped 2.46%, with shares essentially of Nevada, Tesla, and Apple posting strong gains on that matter, and markets reopened following the Memorial Day holidays, the flurry of positive essentially signals. US President Donald Trump said over the weekend that the tariff hike initial set for June 1st would be pushed back to July 9th, following essentially talks with the European Commission President Ursula. The European Union, in turn, agreed to expedite trade discussions in hopes of alleviating essentially the mutual pain of tariffs, according to the EU trade. Now, investor sentiment was further essentially buoyed by a rebound in consumer confidence happening, which rose in May essentially after 5 months of declines. Tuesday's essentially broad market rally saw more than 90% of the S&P 500 components close higher. Small cap stocks also gained, with the Russell essentially 2000 up from 2%. The optimism extended to the bond market, where US treasuries rallied and yields fell. The yields, essentially the 10-year yield, slipped 4.43%, while the 30-year yields essentially dropped 4.94%, and the dollar essentially strengthened, and the global bond markets responded positively to speculation that Japan will also scale back long-term bond issuance after recent volatility. Investors are now turning attention to a busy week of economic data and earnings that's going to be heading our way. Minneapolis essentially Fed President Neal called for central banks to hold interest rates steady and aim the ongoing essentially trade uncertainties. And meanwhile, essentially Nevada is still set to report quarterly results on Wednesday, and Tuesday's rally helped reserve last week's losses, which essentially were triggered by Trump's initial tariffs threats. And analysts say that the back and forth has kept markets volatile but hopeful is what's going on. So stock market doing pretty well for itself, bond market doing pretty well for itself. The dollar is strength once again, and it's only because Trump has decided to delay the tariffs regarding the EU. That's also positive news for the crypto space as well. That means the markets aren't going to be volatile. It's because sometimes Bitcoin follows tech stocks, sometimes it doesn't. So tech stocks are up, Bitcoin's up also. Now, what we're going to be talking about next is the US Senator Luminous. Luminous has been the biggest advocate, you could say, in the government, in the US government, when it comes to Bitcoin. And she is still pushing for a Bitcoin Reserve Act in some sort of way, a Bitcoin Reserve legislation. So here it is. The establishment of a US Bitcoin Reserve marks a pivotal step in cryptocurrency's adoption, potentially altering market dynamics and regulatory landscapes. The Strict Bitcoin Reserve Act, led by Senator Cynthia Luminous and supported by President Donald Trump, aims to establish a federal Bitcoin reserve. The initiative will essentially follow a stablecoin bill, highlighting the strict priorities and financial legislations. President Trump's essentially support for the bill, and he has a team at the White House right now working essentially on digital assets, everything from stablecoins to market structure to essentially a crypto reserve, and they will probably roll out in that order essentially set Senator Cynthia Lummis. Senator Cynthia Lummis and the President Trump also said there's high-level support positioning Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. The proposed acquisition of 1 million essentially Bitcoins valued at around $68 billion is pivotal in shaping essentially market and reserve strategies. Potential effects include elevated market status for Bitcoin and implications for liquidity and price dynamics. Policymakers aim to leverage stablecoins as regulatory precedent in digital policies, and market reactions to state and federal proposals signifies growing institutional interest in Bitcoin. The UAE's recent acquisition via American ETFs underscores international strategic moves, and insights indicate far-reaching ramifications for Bitcoin's role in U.S. finance. Historical trends also show that state-level initiatives and international presence leading momentum in crypto adoption. Significant discussions revolve around legislations and also timelines of market impact. Just want to say one thing, that regarding a purchase of 1 million Bitcoins, is Donald Trump going to approve the purchase of 1 million Bitcoins using US taxpaying money? Probably not. I'll just be very honest. I don't think personally Trump is going to approve to use US taxpaying money to buy Bitcoin. And I'm not saying this to hate on Bitcoin in any sort of way, or anybody that, essentially is a Bitcoin maxi or so on. It's just, it doesn't make sense logically for a United States president to use taxpaying money on an asset where the founder of the asset is anonymous and holds a tremendous amount of, essentially, of that asset, Bitcoin. Because if one day the anonymous founder of Bitcoin decides to cause a ripple effect inside the market space, it could damage President Trump's reputation as pretty much the worst president to do any sort of investment. So you've got to understand that as well. When it comes to the Bitcoin maxis, all they care about essentially is profit, profit, profit. They don't care about the consequences of America using taxpaying money to buy Bitcoin. They don't care about what could happen later on. They care about now, which is profit, profit, profit. Because if you think about it, if, for example, Donald Trump says, yes, let's purchase 1 million Bitcoins, for example, and they purchase 1 million Bitcoins, 5 years down the line, let's just say 10 years down the line, whatever, 1 year down the line, the founder of Bitcoin, which nobody knows who he is, or if it's a group or a government entity, decides to sell. It will make Trump look like the worst president that has ever done any sort of investments for the country. Because if a Bitcoin whale sells, it causes a ripple effect inside the market space. Imagine if the founder sells its Bitcoins. It will cause not just a ripple effect, it will cause essentially a tsunami effect inside the market space. And for a fact, the news will ridicule essentially Donald Trump and his entire family for being the worst president, for the worst investments, or so on and so on. And that is what could happen later on if Trump decides to do this move of purchasing Bitcoin. That is what's going to happen later on. There's a chance of that happening, very high chance of that happening. But again, the people that want Trump to invest $1 million, essentially purchase 1 million Bitcoins, which is equivalent of $68 billion of US taxpaying money, they don't care about the implications later because they care about their profit now. What's happened is greed is just blocking their view. It's just something to consider, because if it goes sideways, it will really go sideways. And it will look bad for Trump. But again, the Bitcoin maxis don't care about that because all they care about is profit and greed. Now, Circle's acquisition is what we talk about next. Also, just want to point out, however, if they find a way to purchase essentially that humongous amount of Bitcoin in some other way, then if they want to, go for it. But using taxpaying money is not the question, is not the answer whatsoever. Now, Circle is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about Circle, let's go inside the comment section next. Let's go inside the comment section first. Richard says, hi, Miles. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Let's go, Richard. How you doing? How you been? Golden Dragon, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? For Tether soon, they cannot show the bonds they claim they are holding. Yep. Let's go, Richard. How you doing? Chris says, she has Bitcoin in her portfolio. Refused to meet with Brad. Oh, yes, that's true. And Senator Cynthia Lummis, in my opinion, is pretty much becoming slowly Gary Gensler 2.0. Greetings, Miles of CMF. Ray, good to see you. How you been? Funky Brother says, Miles, you know it's China holding the majority of Bitcoin. They are Satoshi. I'll be honest, I was the first one to say, I think, I put something out there where I said a long time ago that what if? I said what if? I didn't say it's guaranteed. I said what if? Bitcoin was created by essentially the opposition, which is China, to make the US go full Bitcoin mode and then drop it on the Ross. Because if you really think about it, the first country to go into cryptocurrencies was China. First country to have a CBDC was China. First country to have a social credit system was China. First country to have Bitcoin mining essentially in companies was China. And then they suddenly banned it to make it look like they're not interested anymore. And then and still humongous amount of essentially investments are coming out of China, even though it's banned in China. And there are still some sort of Bitcoin mining happening in China. And then there's the other side where it's fully decentralized, but yet a company gets flooded in China. Bitcoin's hash rate drops by 35%. And those aren't my words; those are essentially Elon Musk's words. But I said, what if Bitcoin was created by the opposition so that the US goes one day full Bitcoin mode, and then China drops it on the Ross? Because China has always wanted to become number one. They tried every method to become number one, every method possible to date. They tried doing it essentially through BRICS. It didn't work. And in sort of a way, all the BRICS members dispersed when Trump came into power. China tried to essentially do investments in countries where the US had investments in, for example, Latin American countries. That didn't work either, and Trump took everything back. So China's been trying for the longest time to take over, and they said they're not going to back down. They're going to stand strong in front of Trump, is what they said on the news. So just consider that as a what if, not guaranteed in any sort of a way, but what if China created Bitcoin to make their opposition, the US or Trump, essentially, who's now the president, go full Bitcoin, and then China drops it on the Ross, and China takes number one as a number one place, because that will be very damaging to one particular country and any other country that's holding it. Because China could pretty much bring the world to its knees, the amount of essential investments that are happening to Bitcoin. It could bring it could bring El Salvador to its knees, for example. If essentially the investments go sideways for El Salvador will be straight on their knees. America will get damaged without a doubt. Other countries that are heavily involved creating that Bitcoin reserve could get damaged as well. China could bring a lot of countries to their knees if they did that. If they did create it, what if scenario? Now, just say, and also I saw people on X posting now saying Bitcoin is Chinese, XRP is American. People need to understand this and so on. It's interesting. People are starting to wake up to that idea. Now, Circle is what we're going to talk about next. Circle's acquisition, essentially. Even Miles of CMF, Pierce, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? So, Circle's acquisition of hash notes, essentially, is happening right now, but it lacks price confirmation. So, Circle Internet Group Inc. has announced the acquisition of Hashnotes Holding LLC on January essentially 21st, 2025, aimed on verified reports of $100 million essentially in transactions, primarily in shares. Back then, essentially, was the acquisition they tried to make, but now it's coming out that are they purchasing it? Are they getting too close to some sort of a deal? So the acquisition boosts Circle's capabilities in tokenized finance, integrating hash notes, USD, USYC, and USDC, but it lacks concrete confirmation of payment details or the speculated essentially by external sources. Circle's recent move to acquire Hashnote essentially holdings was finalized in the prior month, but continues unconfirmed by primary sources. The prominent blockchain essentially financier Circle aims to enhance its market presence. Circle seeks to advance its holdings with acquisitions focusing on integrating US yield coin USYC. Hashnote's essentially tokenized fund product with its stablecoin USDC. This effort aims to position USYC as a preferred collateral. The integration of USYC with USDC will provide seamless access between TMMF and collateral and essentially USDC. The acquisition market impact is anticipated essentially to be substantial, particularly in tokenized finance. However, the unverified financial essentially details necessitates caution. The crypto community essentially awaits further clarification from Circle's officials, and integrating Hashnote's $1.52 billion in tokenized assets with Circle's tool could strengthen both essentially firms and position in the crypto sphere. Very strong position. Historical tokenized fund trends suggest a growth essentially trajectory aligning with Circle's strict goals. And historically, acquisitions like from Hashnotes by Circle sets precedents for others essentially in digital financial sectors as well. Previous similar essentially acquisitions such as BlackRock's tokenized initiatives illustrates the interest in blockchain finance products, and experts indicate that the integration might reinforce USYC's deployment figures, and they argue that careful essentially observations of this integration effects on crypto exchanges and potential regulatory responses. So apparently, Circle is about to go full tokenization mode. $1.52 billion is on the table, but it hasn't been confirmed in any sort of a way. Probably by tomorrow, the day after, maybe some announcements come out on the confirmation. But Circle's doing movements. They're going full IPO. They're essentially acquiring firms. This is just going to make it a much more juicier deal for essentially Ripple, to be fairly honest. Now, what we're going to be talking about next, moving on from Circle to BitGet Exchange. But before we talk about BitGet Exchange, let's go inside the comment section first, because someone has put 2 question marks. I think they need help. Dark Dealer says, would help me to choose coin Binance. Would you help me to choose a coin in Binance? I wouldn't tell you to purchase anything, to be fairly honest. If you want to research coins, I would say stick to the financial sector, Dark Dealer. Stick to XRP, XLM, XDC, HBOB, and read into them, do their research, and if you think they're viable assets, then it's your choice to go for them. Now, BitGet. BitGet expands into real-world assets with BGUSD, offering daily yields and high liquidity. BitGet Exchange has just introduced a new feature. The leading cryptocurrency exchange and Web3 company BitGet has announced the launch of BGUSD, a yield-bearing stable asset certified essentially designed to enhance capital efficiencies and provide passive income and opportunities for users worldwide. BGUSD is fully integrated into platform's trading and wealth management infrastructure, offering a multi-facade essentially utility layer backed by real-world assets. BGUSD is redeemable for USDC at a 1-to-1 ratio and can be subscribed using USDC or USDC. Holding BGUSD provides users with an annual essentially yield of starting at 4% credited daily to their spot accounts based on their minimum essentially daily balances. And for the first 30 days, allowing launch, a promotional APY of 5% will apply. So if anybody wants to go and check out essentially BGUSD from BitGet Exchange, they've just launched their own token essentially. The asset derives its yield from a diversified basket of tier 1 tokenized real-world assets, including high-grade money market funds and tokenized US Treasury products. You can see what area they're aiming for, tokenization. This disciplined yield structure is supported by diversified asset allocations, institutional-grade infrastructure, and partnerships with multiple essentially leading tokenization services providers, including Superstate via their essentially tokenized treasury fund, USTB. At BitGet, our mission has always been to prioritize our users' needs whether it comes from the crypto native community or institutional circles or traditional essentially finances. With BGUSD, we are delivering a solution that bridges the best of both worlds, the transparency and innovation of crypto with the stability and yield opportunities of traditionally essentially found in real world assets. The launch is another step in empowering our global users to achieve smarter and more essentially global users to achieve resilient portfolio growth, said the CEO at BitGet Exchange. So if you want to go and check it out, it's completely up to you. BitGet Exchange has just launched BGUSD. They're going to tokenization. Obviously, BGUSD is a stable coin. It's an alternative essentially to USDC or USDT or USDC, which can also be redeemed hence back to back. Now, moving on from BitGet Exchange's new idea to Prometheus. Prometheus is an exchange, technically a crypto exchange. It has a very interesting history. It was the first platform, first blockchain or crypto platform, that crypto exchange that was fully approved by the SEC. Gary Gensler, the man that hated crypto pretty much, but also understood crypto. But Gary Gensler, the man that hated crypto completely, approved Prometheus when he was in charge as the SEC chairman. During suing Coinbase, Ripple, Binance, anybody inside the crypto space. At the same time, he fully approved, to give full licensings to Prometheus, which raises many questions, because Gary Gensler hated crypto, but approved one company fully, rejected everybody else, and sued them into the ground. And it's only because Prometheus has a tremendous amount of SEC workers, ex-SEC workers, working this platform. It almost seems like Gary Gensler was a hypocrite. And why am I bringing this up? Well, interesting enough, we know from the announcements that essentially yesterday, where I revealed on this live show, that Ripple became the chosen golden goose for essentially real estate tokenization in essentially the UAE. And well, interesting enough, ironically, Prometheus comes out today and acquires Pro Financial and expands into US real-world market spaces. Prometheus acquisition highlights the strict pivot in the burgeoning real-world asset tokenization space, leveraging Pro Financial regulatory status to offer a compliant framework for blockchain-based securities and offerings. Prometheus, led by Aaron, has made significant strides in US blockchain securities. Their acquisition of Pro Financial enables a vertically integrated platform supporting capital formation, custody, and secondary trading. The move aligns with the growing trend towards tokenized assets in capital markets. Aaron has once essentially stated, in today's market, blockchain issuance alone isn't enough. Firms need infrastructure that mirrors the functionalities of capital markets. Financially, Prometheus essentially raised over $15 million recently, enhancing its capabilities to support new infrastructure. And no new specific grants were tied to the acquisition. The event shows a shift towards secure methods of tokenized essentially investment products, altering market dynamics. Regulatory developments are expected with Prometheus essentially SEC and FIRA approvals. As I said, it's the only firm that was approved by Gary Gensler fully, setting a precedent for compliant digital securities infrastructures. This unique integration offers a legally sound route for tokenization, potentially setting a trend for future essentially industry standards. Prometheus' strategy may drive significant regulatory and essentially changes in the real-world asset field. This might cultivate greater acceptance of tokenized assets and digital securities, encouraging further industry innovation. A full lifecycle approach may impact compliance and innovation strategies. This reminds me of when Ripple was, in the early days, when Ripple was going around testing its platform with banks. And why am I bringing this up? I'll tell you now. So in the early days, Ripple was going around essentially approving itself with banks, trying to get banks to use its Ripple Net system and so on, and getting feedback from banks and essentially developing itself further. At the same time, Swift was still fully operational and hated crypto and blockchain in general. Then Ripple started adding on working more essentially on the XRP ledger, and then was the XRP ledger hub and developers and so on, and they expanded further and further and further. And then one day, Ripple got its name on the essentially got its name on the Bank of International Settlements PDF documentation titled Cross-Border Payments, and on that documentation, Ripple got its name alongside Swift. Before that, Swift hated blockchain. Swift hated crypto, said there's no future in crypto, is what Swift said before that. When Ripple got their name on the same PDF documentation that titled Cross-Border Payments, and their name was alongside essentially Swift, about a week later, Swift comes out and says they've partnered essentially with Chainlink. They're going to go into full mode into cross-border payments and data and Web3 and blockchain and everything. Very odd, because Swift didn't care Ripple was creeping up inside the financial sector until Ripple got their name on the same PDF documentation alongside Swift on the Bank of International Settlements PDF documentation titled Cross-Border Payments. Now, why am I bringing this up is because this reminds me of that scenario where the Ripple and Swift scenario, because Prometheus was fully approved by the SEC, has a tremendous amount of ex-SEC workers inside of it. And the SEC at that time, when they were approving Prometheus, they were fully against Ripple. Gary Gensler was fully against blockchain, fully against Ripple. It was the only company they sued for no apparent reason. And the guy that sued Ripple left the SEC 24 hours later to create a blockchain company, which raises more questions. But Prometheus was the only company approved by Gary Gensler, fully approved, green lighted, full license, while they were suing essentially Ripple for the same scenarios. Now, news comes out that Ripple essentially is the golden goose. XRP Ledger is the golden goose for tokenization in the UAE. And then today, this was yesterday. Today, news comes out. Prometheus has decided to go into full tokenization mode, real world asset mode, and they've essentially acquired a firm to expand their reach. Prometheus it just raises a million questions for me. That a man that hated crypto, Gary Gensler hated crypto, sued Ripple for no apparent reason, but yet gave a full green light to a crypto company that has a tremendous amount of ex-SEC members inside of it. At the same time, now, Thailand is what we're going to talk about next. So moving off essentially from Prometheus' questionable investment strategies and timeline to Thailand. Thailand to link crypto to credit cards. Yesterday on this live, I talked about the ASEAN countries, the 10 Southeast Asian countries who are getting heavily involved in blockchain. And according to the World Economic Forum, they called it a game changer because 10 Southeast Asian countries came together to start cross-border payments as their number one priority. Cross-border payments and tokenization for trade, number one priority. And the World Economic Forum called it a game changer. Well, today we have more news regarding that matter from one of those essentially ASEAN countries, Thailand. Thailand has announced plans to integrate cryptocurrencies into its mainstream economy. They're taking their steps pretty damn quick, beginning with a system that lets tourists spend crypto via their credit cards. The Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, essentially Pichu, revealed the initiative during a high-level seminar in Bangkok today. The Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Thailand are jointly reviewing the proposal. If approved, tourists will essentially soon link their crypto wallets to credit cards for local purchase. Merchants will receive payments in Thai baht without knowing if crypto was used. This approach shields the domestic currency from direct crypto exposure. It also encourages crypto adoption through existing financial infrastructure. Besides introducing crypto for tourism, Thailand plans to unify its capital and digital asset markets under one legal framework. Currently, separate laws essentially govern these sectors, creating inefficiencies and legal confusion. Pichu essentially emphasized the need to streamline financial legislation. He added that current laws and restricts essentially institutional investors like life issuers and large funds. These groups often essentially limit investing in government bonds. Hence, the government plans to broader access to equities and private sector assets. Apparently, Thailand is about to be opening stores full crypto mode. Moreover, Thailand also aims to reform its treasury stock rules and improve fairness in local markets. The Ministry of Finance is reviewing high-frequency trading practices, seeking better essentially oversight. A new law draft could soon expand the Thai SEC's power. It may allow the Commission to directly bring serious financial cases to prosecutors, and this change could strengthen the regulatory enforcement and market integrity. Thailand is also tightening in its grip on unregulated foreign crypto platforms. The Thai SEC has introduced strict penalties targeting illegal peer-to-peer crypto activity. Offenders may essentially face up to 3 years in prison or fines up to 300,000 baht. These new rules aim to fight online financial crimes more effectively in Thailand. Additionally, the government is launching a G token, they're calling it. Thailand is calling their government token, not the Thai digital baht, but the government itself is launching a token by the name of G token, a blockchain-based initiative allowing retail access to fractional government bonds. This initiative will help improve savings returns and evaluate Thailand's global debt market reputation. And also, the finance minister confirmed plans to issue $150 million in digital bond tokens. Thailand is rapidly transforming into a regional hub for regulated digital finance, balancing innovation with security. So, yesterday I talked about the ASEAN countries going full crypto. It seems like Thailand and the Asian countries are not, holding back or going into thinking mode for a couple of years. And they announced it yesterday and they're taking action today. That is rapidly quick, I'll be very honest. Now, What we're going to be talking about next is China, because Donald Trump rejected China's money, basically, and China's not happy. But before we talk about that, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or comments to make, put it outside the comment section. I read everybody's comments one by one. Now, let's see what Scott has said inside the comment section and then afterwards we go straight into China news. Hello to Miles and my CMF. I hope that everyone had a good day. Tomorrow is the last day of school for the summer, out of the classroom until August 15, 2025. Let's go, Scott. Good to see you, but how you doing? Scott also says share the live, and he says let's go CMF. Let's go CMF. Facts. Robin says, in which month do you see alt season starting to be parabolic, in your opinion, approximately? The moment stablecoin regulations are passed, that's going to be a positive firework inside the crypto market space. That momentum will continue, obviously, with the Ripple case closing and with more regulations coming in. So the moment that regulation essentially is passed, or according to Senator Cynthia Luminis, it's going to be coming in a week of announcements. Let's see how that goes. Now, Q3 is pretty much where I'm saying it as. Morning, Miles and CMF. Shelly, good to see you. Morning. How you doing? How you been? Share the live. Let's go, Scott. Let's go, CMF. Scott also says, I stayed at the Baltimore Inn in Asheville, NC, over the weekend. I was there in September before the flood hit North Carolina, the devastation that the city has endured. Please continue to pray for them. Sorry to hear that for anybody that is essentially in that state in America. I have to make it in crypto so that I can help communities in Asheville, North Carolina. Scott, you have honestly a big heart. Let's go for Scott. Could CFX play a role in the Asian cross-border payments you mentioned? Possibly, yes, it could play a role. The traditional route, would you know about Aurora? No, I don't. But I could take a look into it for you. No problem, Scott. Hi, Miles and family. Alex, good to see you. How you doing? How you been, brother? Now, China to invest $35 billion in Latin America. You see, China's money is being rejected by Donald Trump. China essentially has been rejected in general by Donald Trump until China comes to some sort of an agreement with Donald Trump. Trump is putting a lot of pressure on China in terms of their contracts, in terms of their tariffs, in terms of Chinese companies, and so on. So China is fed up, and they want to invest their money somewhere. They could invest it into their own essentially economy, to be fairly honest. China has a very crippling real estate market that they don't like to talk about often. But they've decided to invest $35 billion in Latin America because they want to get Latin American countries behind them. They're not doing it because China cares about Latin Americans, just to be fairly honest. China's not doing this investment because they care about Latin America. China's doing this investment because they want to, infuriate Trump. China has pledged to invest up to $35 billion in Colombia and Latin American infrastructure projects if the United States follows through with its threat of blocking funding from Chinese firms. The growing rivalry between essentially US and China has begun to affect economies in Latin America. The region could potentially land a $35 billion investment from China in response to threats from the US. China has declared that it is prepared to invest as much as $35 billion into infrastructure projects in Colombia and Latin American regions. Speaking to reporters today, Zhu Jing, China's essentially ambassador to Colombia, stated that China, along with BRICS' new development bank, ND Bank, is essentially prepared ready to fund more than 100 infrastructure ventures across Latin America. China and other friendly countries have the capacity to finance, Zhu emphasized, and his essentially statements clarifies that Beijing is ready to step in should the US carry through with its threat to block loans from essentially Chinese lenders. The announcement of China's essentially potential $35 billion investment comes after Colombia's president, Guaido's recent state visit to China, during essentially which Andean nation formally joined Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Citing concerns about security, transparency, and debt diplomacy, the US has attempted severally to isolate China from global developments and finance essential institutions. The Trump administration has openly stated its intent to block loans to Chinese firms from entities such as the Inter-American Development Banks and other essential lenders as well, In response, China is positioning itself as a much-needed partner at a time when Latin American nations are seeking to modernize their transportation, energy, and digital infrastructure. I just want to tell people how this works. Some people will look at this news and say, China is helping Latin American countries and Trump is the evil man in this equation. I just want to point one thing out that most people don't understand when it comes to politics. Countries like the US, countries like China, or Russia, or India, not India as much, countries like China, Russia, and America, what they tend to do, and even France does this a lot as well. What they tend to do is throw money about in countries that need money. A lot of Latin American countries need help in terms of modernizing their economies. And what they do, for example, China will take its big wallet and go to Latin American countries and start doing investments and start pouring money into their politicians' pockets. And then one day, China is going to turn around and say to these Latin American countries that because they've done 100 infrastructure projects on their transportation, on their health systems, on everything in their country, China is going to turn around one day and say to these Latin American countries, now we want our money back. And these Latin American countries are going to say, well, we don't have it. And China's going to say, no problem. Then we own this and this and this for eternity, because you're never going to be able to pay it back. Now, this is a tactic used by the US. It's used by France. It's used by China, and also used by Russia in some states, in some scenarios as well. But again, honestly, some people will look at this essentially and say, China's trying to help build Latin American countries. They're trying to invest in Latin American countries and help their people. And Trump is not letting them do that. Trump is an evil man for that. But people don't understand the backbone of it, which is China's going to own those American countries, own those Latin American countries later on. China's literally going to own them. I'll give you an example, because people might say, well, you're lying. How do you know? Well, as I said previously on this live, I'm Persian. I'm Iranian. How do I know this? I'll give you an example for my own country. China came to Iran, okay? China came to Iran and they did a deal. They gave the Iranian government lots of money, piles of cash. And when it came to pay up, the Iranian government had no money to pay up. So what does China do? China takes a tremendous amount of essentially Iran's oil. And they say, we're going to build oil rigs. They actually said this to Iran. They said, we're going to build oil rigs and we'll give you this much and we will take this much because you owe us money. Not only that, but they essentially are owning those infrastructures now. So honestly, when you see news articles like this come out and it's essentially saying China is investing $35 billion in Latin America, that's brilliant news. Why is Trump the evil man, not letting China invest in Latin America? Because China will own those Latin American countries later on, will literally own them. The same way France, that weasel Macron, owns a tremendous amount of African countries, owns quite a lot of their infrastructure as well. And on one of those African countries, France was kicked out completely when one army leader came out of nowhere and kicked out the French. But that's just what these countries do. These countries go to countries that need money. They open up their fat wallets and they give them pools of cash. And at one point they'll go, well, time's up. We need our money back. And those countries will go, well, we don't have it. They'll go, okay, no problem. We're just going to take this, 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 and this because you can't afford to pay us back. And they'll own them for the rest of their lives. That's what happens when countries go, we're going to invest into this, essentially into this country and so on, when they're investing into countries that are much more poorer than them. The Belt and Road Initiative, they're calling it, is the massive global infrastructure and investment program aimed at deepening China's economy influence and Colombia's entrance into the flood means of the country's changing, essentially, its international alliance. Colombia has now joined more than 20 countries in the region that have signed cooperation agreements under the BRI. It is expected that the partnerships will accelerate infrastructure developments and essentially in key sectors such as railroads, highways, ports, and renewable energy. All these investments, those countries will never be able to pay back China. According to Colombian officials, the agreements signed during essentially Petro's visit include several priority areas, such as improving transport connectivity between rural and urban zones in Colombia, developing smart cities in Colombia, enhancing digital infrastructure through 5G in Colombia, and cloud computing partnerships in Colombia and other Latin American countries. While the specific projects to be funded under the $35 billion pledged have not yet been detailed fully, it can be expected that China's support would cover a wide range. China is going to own those countries. The Colombian essentially leader who basically signed away his country to China, what an idiot. But that's what happens when people vote in morons. But in some cases, you don't really get a choice. I'll be very honest. Same goes in my country. Where I'm from, I'm Persian, I'm Iranian. People don't get a vote in Iran. It's just they choose their own leaders out of thin air. Now, CZ is what we're going to talk about next. So moving off from the announcements of Colombia's pretty much being sold off to China to Binance. Binance's founder, CZ, makes an unexpected comment and targets the big bull. CZ, I just read Stormy's comment inside the comment section. You mean Macron and his daddy wife? Yeah, Macron and his daddy wife, facts. Now, Binance. CZ sent out a tweet. Now, this one is very interesting. I mean, this one is just, you could even pretty much say some sort of a rabbit hole scenario. CZ sent out a tweet stating essentially that he probably sold Bitcoin. Now, the crypto space is, thinking to themselves, who is CZ, the founder of Bitcoin, talking about? Who is CZ referring to? He probably sold his Bitcoin. Just simple. He probably sold his Bitcoin. Binance's founder and former CEO CZ caused confusion with a statement he made on X. CZ recently shared a message with the phrase "probably sold Bitcoin" and added a laughing emoji at the end of his message, and that's it. It is not known exactly who the Binance founder has targeted with this mysterious statement, but there are some guesses among the cryptocurrency community. One of the biggest Bitcoin bulls is obviously MicroStrategy. The founder, Michael Saylor. Just want to point this out. Is it Michael Saylor that CZ is referring to, essentially, of selling his Bitcoins? Because here's what's happened also at the exact same time CZ sending out this tweet. This happened pretty much before it. Michael Saylor said in a statement today that there is no need for interventions such as proof of reserves and audits for companies holding Bitcoin. I'm sorry, what? Michael Saylor said there is no need for proof of reserves and audits for companies that hold Bitcoin because these create security vulnerabilities. How does that create security vulnerabilities? Are we just finding out that MicroStrategy is buying Bitcoin? Is the world just finding out they're buying Bitcoin? Because he tweets about it every 5 seconds. If he's using the argument of hackers might know that we hold Bitcoin, I think the whole world knows you hold Bitcoin. So that's not really, a viable argument in any sort of a way for you to be stating, because of malicious attacks, we shouldn't be audited or show any proofs of reserve. The whole world knows you got Bitcoin. If you're going to be attacked by hackers, you're probably going to be attacked by hackers. Saylor, who received a huge backlash for this statement, may be the person CZ is claiming has sold Bitcoin. Because it does raise a million questions. And also, first of all, or second of all, are we supposed to just accept Michael Saylor is holding this amount of Bitcoin? He could come out and, it's just mind-blowing is the word to use right now. May the person essentially CZ claims sold Bitcoin to, according to proponents of this theory, Saylor is not keen on measures such as proof of reserves because he sold Bitcoin. So CZ could be referring to him. There is no official information that Saylor has sold Bitcoin, and there is no information in recent SEC filings that they have sold Bitcoin. However, purchases and sales that are not included periodically filed SEC documents can be identified as on-chain. We will see in the coming days if CZ is serious about this and if he really has Michael Saylor in his sights. Michael Saylor's rejection of proof of reserves illustrates the ongoing debate between traditional corporate governance and crypto-native transparency practices. Michael Saylor, a prominent figure in the cryptocurrency industry, expressed concerns about the security of an on-chain proof of reserves. The prominent Bitcoin holder believes revealing such reserves could compromise security. His comments essentially emphasize a focus on security and resilience in the face of potential risk. He said, "You publish your wallet, that's an attack, essentially that's an attack vector for hackers, nation-state actors, every type of troll imaginable," he said. So if he shows his wallet, Michael Saylor is saying we could be attacked. If he doesn't show his wallet, we have to take his word for it. Or because even the filings they do with the SEC in terms of their buys and sells, there's still a gray area if they're holding it on-chain. Strategy utilizes traditional governance models, opting for audits by KPMG LLP instead of crypto-native transparency tools. The company remains one of the largest institutional Bitcoin holders. Saylor cautioned against adopting practices he perceives as an attack vector for malicious actors. The stance reflects broader tensions concerning adoption practices in the cryptocurrency world. Differences between corporate frameworks and emerging transparency approaches affect stakeholders. Strategy's decision highlights the delicate balance between transparency and security in digital asset spaces. In an industry learning essentially from past failures like FTX strategy opts for cautious entanglement essentially with transparency mechanisms. They're saying the FTX situation is why they're not showing their wallets. FTX wasn't hacked. The founder of FTX just used the money to buy yachts. Adherence to auditing standards, it plays into the institutional cryptocurrency adoption narrative, potentially influencing further essentially future practices. Financial, regulatory, and technological outcomes hinge on the success of institutional adoption. Organizations navigating between traditional practices and innovative transparency measures contribute to evolving landscapes, and with Strategy's stance offering insights into industry adaptation. So, MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, rejects the idea of showing his reserves. And he says that companies that hold Bitcoin should never show proof of reserves. I mean, that sentence just sounds dodgy. Forget about the act. There's a reason Tether was rejected by the EU. It's that same reason that Tether didn't want to show proof of reserves, that they don't want to hold their reserves, some of their reserves, in EU banks. And the EU's concern was of depegging scenarios or if they actually had the reserves. And also on the argument that Michael Saylor says that they shouldn't show proof of reserves and that anybody holding, essentially anybody holding, Bitcoin in their company should never show proof of reserves or any crypto. Circle showed their proof of reserves when they got approved by the MiCA regulations. USDC is operating in Europe because they showed proof of reserves. Circle wasn't maliciously attacked. Honestly, it's the stupidest essentially argument Michael Saylor has ever used in his entire lifetime of if we show proof of reserves, then we're vulnerable to hackers and malicious attackers. Circle showed proof of reserves to the EU, hence why USDC has a full green light in the EU. Tether showed no reserves, hence why they're rejected in the EU for USDT. And him stating, I don't know what sometimes these people think, but I think they assume everybody around them must be stupid. But that should be an interesting one to see who CZ is talking about, because he didn't point fingers, but he definitely put it out there. At the same time, Michael Saylor put that statement out that you shouldn't show proof of reserves. What we're going to talk about next is a company that has no issue of showing their reserves. So Michael Saylor says, we're not showing ours because of attackers. Well, what about BlackRock? Because they have no issues showing their reserves. You're saying BlackRock isn't scared of attackers? That you're essentially saying that, you know, everybody, every attacker, every hacker in the world is only targeting MicroStrategy? BlackRock, essentially under the CEO Larry Fink, has also increased its in-house exposure to IBIT Bitcoin ETFs by 25%, highlighting its confidence in Bitcoin's role as a global asset. And the move demonstrates increased institutional interest and market positioning, potentially influencing Bitcoin's perceived legitimacy and adoption. The world's essentially largest manager, BlackRock, has expanded its exposure to Bitcoin ETFs by 25%. A significant institutional shift. BlackRock's iShares division introduced the IBIT ETF, reflecting its evolving essentially strategy. Larry Fink leadership continues to drive these strategies' moves. And he said the iShares Bitcoin Trust is about accessibility, security, efficiency, and accessing Bitcoin markets, Larry Fink said. He said BlackRock has allocated 1 to 2% of its model portfolios to IBIT, highlighting its evolving trust in Bitcoin. The asset manager's pivot towards cryptocurrencies has spotlighted Bitcoin's increasing institutional appeal. This adjustment impacts investors by underscoring institutional resilience in cryptocurrency markets, and the shift could inspire essentially similar actions among other asset managers, further essentially driving Bitcoin's adoption. There are implications for other sectors, essentially seeking Bitcoin's validation, and essentially financial markets react, showing potential price swings and volatility in Bitcoin. The larger allocations imply significant Bitcoin inflows, affecting essentially trading volumes and potentially Bitcoin's pricing projections. Historically, such institutional moves have increased Bitcoin's demand and price appreciation. SEC approvals of Bitcoin ETFs in early 2024 have set precedents, and this current increase by BlackRock could follow similar outcomes, affecting cryptocurrencies markets significantly. Experts also suggest that this streak alignment with Bitcoin showcases BlackRock's institutional confidence. The expansion may result in further market stabilization and growth in Bitcoin's acquisition, with potential impacts on related industries. Just want to point out, regarding what I said regarding Michael Saylor essentially and CZ situation, I'm not a Bitcoin hater in any sort of way, but when it comes to transparency, I think it should be there 100%. Because with Michael Saylor stating, essentially they don't need to show transparency, they don't need to show their reserves in any sort of way, proof of reserves in any sort of way. BlackRock hasn't rejected that idea in any sort of way. BlackRock is fine with the idea of showing proof of reserves, but yet Michael Saylor isn't. Raises questions, because why didn't BlackRock say the same thing? Binance is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about Binance, let's go inside the comment section first. Honestly, if Michael Saylor, if there are people out there inside the crypto space, inside the Bitcoin space, who are saying Michael Saylor has a valid point for not showing proof of reserves, if there are Bitcoin supporters out there who are saying Michael Saylor has a valid point for not showing his proof of reserves, then why isn't essentially BlackRock making the same point? Why isn't Franklin Templeton making the same point? Why isn't 21 Shares making the same point? Why isn't Grayscale making the same point? Because it's not a valid point. The whole point of going crypto is for transparency, not to hide your portfolios or your reserves. Raises questions. Let's go start the comment section first before we go through the next news on tonight's slide. The next news is about Binance and Brazil. So let's see what's going to start the comment section first. As I previously, this is live as usual, which means if you do have any questions or comments, put them down in the comment section. George says, found a coin, sounds good, DNX. Can you have a look? Yes, George, leave a comment outside the live on YouTube. I'll take a look and I'll reply back to your comment, no problem. Michael Saylor knows that he has to sell his Bitcoin soon, as he has to pay back the loans. So Funky Brother said. Funky Brother says also, so he doesn't want to show his portfolio. Nope. CZ is definitely talking about Saylor. When are we going to see regulations? It's very, very soon. According to Simply Luminous, in about a week's time. I hope Saylor's portfolio crashes. JP says BlackRock has money. Michael borrowed money. That's why he didn't want to show it. He doesn't have it. That's a point as well. Now, Binance is what we're going to talk about next. Binance integrates with Brazil's PIX payment system. So, another example of traditional financial systems connected to blockchain. Binance officially announces integration with Brazil's PIX payment system, significantly enhancing its cryptocurrency transactions and its capabilities in the country. This integration is expected to accelerate crypto adoptions in Brazil, leveraging a widespread use of PIX and potentially setting a precedent for similar integrations globally. The collaboration between Binance Pay and Brazil's PIX facilitates seamless cryptocurrency transactions for millions. This represents a major step in aligning traditional financial systems with the digital world once again. Binance, led by CEO essentially Zhao, is essentially further its reach by partnering with Brazil's national payment systems. PIX, this move essentially highlights the Brazil's growing crypto markets and its existing essentially digital infrastructure. And Richard Teng essentially, and CZ said this integration represents a pivotal moment in the adoption of cryptocurrencies in Brazil, aligning with our strategies and to localize our services to work with established financial systems. Brazil's hosting essentially a significant portion of the global crypto markets and stands to benefit economically from this move. The integration may prompt a shift in how digital and fiat currencies interact here. Analysts suggest that financial impacts could be substantial, given that 17% of Brazilians hold digital assets. By utilizing PIX, Binance potentially reaches a broader audience, offering faster and more accessible transactions, and this marks a precedent as no other cryptocurrency exchange has previously integrated at this scale with the national essentially payment systems. The success of PIX, launched in 2020, provides a strong foundation for future developments. Experts also suggest that the emerging markets like Brazil are crucial for cryptocurrency adoptions. Historical data indicates that regions with robust digital infrastructures can drive innovation and showcase Brazil as a potential global leader. Now, moving on from Binance's integration into Brazil's payment system to Ohio. Ohio's candidate, Vivek Ramsey, which we haven't talked about for a long time since the presidency situation, is speaking at the Bitcoin 2025 event. Vivek Ramsey, running for governor in Ohio, spoke at essentially the Bitcoin 2025, the world's largest gathering of Bitcoiners. The conference is held in Las Vegas. Thousands of enthusiasts discuss the future of decentralized finance. The event, essentially organized by Bitcoin Inc., featured notable figures. Ohio's candidate, Vivek Ramsey, discussed technological advancements and potential impacts on state policies. The participation of a political candidate in a major cryptocurrency conference highlights the importance of understanding digital currencies and political contexts. Vivek Ramsey's also presence attracted significant attention from various sectors. Financial implications of this engagement are speculative, but underline the increasing role of digital economies and political platforms. Cryptocurrency experts and political analysts have noted that this trend comes across in multiple forms. The Bitcoin conference has always been a platform for transformative discussions about the future of money, said the head of digital asset research of VanEck. The conference, essentially in Las Vegas, serves as a platform for technological advancements impacting financial systems, and participants anticipate in key outcomes influencing policy discussions. The focus on regulatory landscapes continues to shape discussions, with initiatives essentially involving blockchain finance experts are analyzing potential changes in the market, and these also might include regulatory adjustments and economic integrations, and discussions supported by historical trends and expert analysis fuel still speculative but crucial insights. So there is also a massive crypto event right now happening in Las Vegas. It's not just essentially a Bitcoin event. It's also an XRP event. It's also other events, crypto blockchain events that are going on right now in Las Vegas. And we're most likely going to get maybe some announcements coming in from some of these essentially companies, from these blockchain companies, which I will review in the coming days as well. But now, moving on essentially from Vivek Ramsey making statements, but it's also, the political world connecting to the crypto world. It's evident it's always going to be happening no matter what. And also we need politics on our side to get the green lights we need for crypto, to be fairly honest. Now, yesterday on this live, I revealed regarding Ripple, XRP Ledger, Dubai, or the UAE in general, tokenization of real estate on essentially the XRP Ledger is what I revealed on yesterday's live. And today I have, a little bit of an update on that matter as well. Just a little bit more of a brief scenario. So the $16 billion real estate tokenization, which we talked about yesterday, I have some more information. So this is the more information. Earlier this week, the Dubai Land Department, DLD, unveiled the Firo essentially Mint, a pioneering tokenized real estate platform created through a collaboration with Firo, the Dubai Future Foundations, Alt, and the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority. This innovative system allows investors to gain fractional ownership of Dubai's properties by purchasing digital shares tied to real-world assets. The minimum investment for this venture on the XRP Ledger for tokenization starts at just 2,000 dirhams, which is about $540, opening the door to a wide range of participants for anybody to get involved in tokenization for the first time ever in the UAE on the XRP Ledger. What's striking is that CLT Alt, the technology partner behind this platform, selected XRP Ledger. Now, just to point this out, they could have chosen anyone. They could have chosen Ethereum, like how essentially BlackRock chose for their tokenization from Ethereum. They could have chosen Solana for tokenization. They could have chosen AVAX. They could have chosen Bitcoin, as Bitcoin maxis would say. Bitcoin is for everything and everyone, and you don't need any other projects. But they chose the XRP Ledger as the blockchain backbone, not Bitcoin, despite its global recognition. This decision sparked heated discussions around the crypto space, with many wondering why Dubai's government bypassed the original cryptocurrency for this $16 billion project to be flourished by 2033. To shed light on the choice, there has been some, essentially debates of why they possibly chose the XRP Ledger over another asset like Bitcoin, which is globally known. So here it is. One of the reasons is for the lightning fast transactions. Even though Bitcoin maxis do claim that Bitcoin has the Lightning Network and it's perfect and nothing else can beat it, apparently the UAE government thinks otherwise. Square essentially emphasized that the XRP Ledger's transaction speed was a decisive factor. The XRP Ledger can finalize transactions in just 3 to 5 seconds. A stock contracts to the Bitcoin sluggishness confirmation times, which can range from 10 minutes to an hour if Bitcoin's network is congested. For a dynamic real estate platform handling countless microtransactions, speed is everything. Facts. Cost efficiency is probably another reason why they chose the XRP Ledger. Played another crucial role. While Bitcoin's transactions can incur notable fees, XRP transactions cost just a fraction of a cent, and highlighted that this ultra essentially low fee structure makes the XRP Ledger ideal for high volume systems like fractional real estate trading, where every cent matters. Superior scalability. When it comes to scaling, the XRP Ledger outperforms Bitcoin, even though the Bitcoin maxis, say otherwise, that Bitcoin, as they say, Bitcoin is for everything and for everyone. If you ask a Bitcoin maxi, what is the best token, they'll say Bitcoin. They'll say Bitcoin is the best for a hedge against inflation. Bitcoin is the best for tokenization. Bitcoin is the best for NFTs. Bitcoin is the best for payments. But to the UAE government, it isn't. So regarding their scalability, he pointed out essentially that the XRP ledger can process up to roughly 1,500 transactions per second compared to Bitcoin's limit of about 7 per second. This scalability ensures that the platform can handle massive future demands, aligning with Dubai's long-term vision for large-scale tokenized property markets. Now, none of these are opinions, they're facts. Eco-friendly infrastructure. Sustainability is central to Dubai's development agenda, and here the XRP ledger shines. Unlike Bitcoin's proof-of-work mechanism, which relies on energy-hungry mining operations, XRP ledger uses consensus protocol that's energy-efficient and environmentally friendly. He explained that this green approach essentially aligns perfectly with Dubai's push towards an eco-innovation future. Institutional compatibility. According also to the review of what would have been the better choice, Bitcoin, for Bitcoin Maxis or XRP ledger for the XRP Army, Ripple, the company behind XRP, has spent years building bridges with banks, regulators, and government agencies worldwide. This track record of institutional engagement made the XRP ledger a natural fit for Dubai's government-backed project. By contrast, Bitcoin, while very popular among retail investors, lacks the same level of institutional alignment and is often seen as a less adaptable for large-scale regulated initiatives. Governments pretty much see Bitcoin as a reserve asset if they want to keep on the sidelines, and some don't even see it as that. Diverse proven use cases. Lastly, the XRP ledger's broad utility across sectors like cross-border payments, stablecoin issuance, central bank digital currencies, and asset tokenizations. While Bitcoin is primarily regarded as a store of value, the XRP ledger offers proven technical infrastructure for tokenization, making it a clear winner for the project centered on digital property shares. The bottom line, it's utility over ideology. Major government-backed projects prioritize practical utility over ideological appeals, and Dubai chose XRP because it's fast, cheap, scalable, energy efficient, and institution-ready. With the Dubai real estate tokenization market expected to swell to $16 billion by the next decade, this decision to use the XRP ledger marks a powerful endorsement of the blockchain's capabilities. As global interest in tokenized real estate grows, and believe me, it is, there's a tremendous amount of countries coming out now and saying, tokenization is the way forward they want to go. For example, yesterday, the 10 Southeast Asian countries, the ASEAN group, all came out and said they want to go for cross-border payments and tokenization. One of those countries is actually being Singapore also, which, if we're not mistaken, was the first country to approve Ripple under their monetary authority of Singapore and give Ripple on their XRP ledger a full approval green light. But yes, tokenization is going to become a humongous factor when we go forward, and this indication of Dubai's government choosing essentially XRP ledger to be the golden goose of this tokenization project. Other countries will look at this and go, maybe we should go this way as well. As a global interest in tokenized real estate grows, Dubai's move may set the standard for how governments and institutions approach blockchain adoption, prioritizing functionality, scalability over mere name recognition. In other words, Bitcoin has a name, XRP ledger is actually useful. On that topic of the XRP ledger, XRP shows technical strength against essentially gold, the S&P 500, aimed price consolidation. So in the past week, the values of XRP gold and the S&P 500 have acted similarly, indicating that XRP has regained strong. The outcome of these ratios suggests that the consolidation phase may be finishing, which could lead to an asset moving in one direction in the coming weeks, which is up. Despite falling essentially slightly, technical analysis demonstrates that a breakout could happen in any direction. XRP currently trades at around $2.30, essentially marking a 2.3% decline over the past 24 hours. While trading near a key support level at essentially $2.29, a narrow band essentially at $2.35 suggests that the resistance level could squeeze higher. In technical terms, XRP as a pair of gold, XRP as a pair to the S&P 500 ratios have both formed converging essentially triangle patterns, often interpreted as preload to a breakout. The XRP as a pair to gold weekly chart has shown the asset forming a descending wedge since 2025, which is normally essentially a sign that prices may reserve upwards. For the XRP as a pair to S&P 500, the constellation also looks like a triangle, a systematic triangle, which means traders are still unsure about the market's direction. Believe me, it's going to be up. The narrowing price ranges on both charts reflecting declining volatility, a common essentially condition before a large moves, and market watchers suggest that the current structure aligns with historical setups where XRP has made significant directional shifts following a prolonged constellation essentially being staggered. In the past, when XRP was staggered on a chart, what happened next? Fireworks. What's en route to be happening next, which is basically the case on paper being done, ETF has been done to be happening, stablecoin rules and regulations. You can tell where the market's going to be headed. XRP's current price movement shows a hovering just above the support of $2.29 with an immediate resistance at $2.35. The proximity of these levels demonstrates that there is not much essentially of strength or trend in either bullish or bearish movements for now. Such a move indicates that leaving essentially this trending range might cause the markets to become volatile and revise its value when measured against other cryptocurrencies and cryptos. Against Bitcoin, the asset has gained slightly now, represents a 0.8% growth. And since XRP is doing well against Bitcoin, this may indicate that XRP could move upwards regardless of what the rest of the market does. Facts. Given that XRP's price is stable, its value in relation to gold and the S&P 500 shows that traders essentially are viewing this asset as a main coin crypto story. Look, I'll be very honest with everyone. Just think about what's going to be happening next, which is the stablecoin regulation. That's going to be a positive sentiment for the crypto space without a doubt. What's also going to be happening next is essentially the case. Ripple case, SEC case on paper, finished. What's also going to be happening next is ETFs. And if Ripple essentially buys out Circle, even better. If the Fed introduces a rate cut, it'll be a cherry on top. The market is headed towards a good space. Slowly, we're going towards good space for the US market space, which also impacts the world market space. But on the other side of the world, the Asian countries are right now putting their foot to the pedal. They announced yesterday, 10 of those countries, the Southeast Asian countries, the ASEAN group, Thailand, Singapore, and so on, are going fully crypto. They introduced it yesterday. They're going full cross-border payments for domestically, international, and so on, and tokenization. Today, they're making announcements. They're integrating essentially crypto into their credit cards, even for tourists, and trying to get more institutions involved. If you're thinking to yourself that we're very, very far off from this digital future, we're actually closer than you think, to be fairly honest. The biggest thing is that time is running out for all these banks and institutions. They need liquidity, and one place has a lot of it. On that note, we have also come to the endings of tonight's live. So if you're watching this for the first time ever, this was the CMF Live. It stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles, and you can tune to this live Monday to Friday, where I talk about the most recent news that's happening around the world in terms of cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. Pretty much everything you need to know about this world going into this digital space. I always share you the news and I break it down so everybody has a better understanding. So you always want to have a better understanding of what's happening inside the crypto space. Tune to this live Monday to Friday, 11:25 p.m. London time. I will see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. And a disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. Also, if you followed me during this live, thank you so much for following me. If you subscribe to me and watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for following me as well. If you're watching this on X and you've liked and retweeted this live, thank you so much. And if you also watching on YouTube and you've liked the live as well, thank you so much as well. I'll be seeing everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Theoretically, let's go into the comment section, obviously, before we do go. Christopher says, love the content, Miles. Keep up the good work. Let's go, Christopher. Thanks so much for the kind words. Theoretically asking, Scott says, what is your opinion on someone borrowing money to invest in XRP and or XLM? I think I know your answer, but to ask anyways. Never borrow money to buy a crypto asset, is what I would say. But if you can afford to pay back the loan, or if you can afford to pay back the credit, then that's up to you. Obviously not financial advice in any sort of way. This bull run is going to last 3+ years. This time next year, XRP will be 3 digits. Let's go, Christopher. Night, Miles and CMF. Pablo, let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. JP, good night, Miles and all CMF. Thank you for a great live and news. Let's go, JP. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Take care, Miles and CMF. Ray, see you tomorrow, same time as usual, brother. I have nothing more than continuously accumulating more crypto projects. Let's go, Thompson. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF. Miles, for keeping us grounded and for such professional crypto news, you are godsend. Let's go free forever. Absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for the kind words. Frankie Brother says, good night, Miles, and good night, CMF. Let's go, Frankie Brother. Thanks, Legend. Glad the restream issue has been fixed. Night and day, CMF. Facts. Honestly, I'm so happy it's been fixed as well. Thank you, Miles and CMF. Mike, thank you so much, brother. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. I will be seeing everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. If you haven't already, if you have already, actually, thank you so much to everybody that's liked the live, retweeted the live, and subscribed and followed if you already haven't. I will be seeing everybody tomorrow, same time as usual, 11:25 p.m. London time as usual. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Everybody have a good day or a good night, depending on where you're around the world. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual, for episode 317 of the CMF Live. We're on episode 317 tomorrow. Good night, CMF. Let's go, Christopher. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Miles, thanks as always for your integrity. Let's go, Scott. Thank you, Miles. Let's go, Stormy. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual.